Thanks both to Richard and Wendy Pini for being willing to answer my 6 fabulous questions that everybody has heard a million times, but you're very gracious to answer anyway. Question number 1 is, how did you get started working in comics?
So by a very roundabout route. I was originally a science fiction illustrator, and then I was invited to write an issue of Red Sonja for Marvel Comics. And out of that grew my reputation in comics, and I proposed the idea of ElfQuest to Richard in 1977. He liked the idea very much, and we settled on doing it as a series of comics, and we happened to know a couple of distributors who took our first print run, and it sold out immediately, which is capturing lightning in a bottle. That's how we got started.
We knew nothing about anything about the business of comics. We taught ourselves everything.
Yep.
And learned as we went. We made mistakes, we learned from them, and here we are 33 years later.
Wow. All right. Question number 2 is, did you read comics when you were kids, and who were some of your influences when you were children?
I can remember reading comics starting at about the age of 8, and it was Superman and Batman. When I was a teenager, I graduated to Marvel Comics because they were very character-driven. As a writer, I've always gravitated toward writers who were kind of like smart guys. Keith Laumer in science fiction, Robert B. Parker and his Spencer detective novels, that sort of thing.
My early influences were Shakespeare and Dickens and fairy tales, classic literature. I started reading comics in my early teens. I was attracted to Marvel Comics. Fantastic Four was the first comic I ever read. And I was also interested in fantasy literature. For a while, Michael Moorcock was my favorite author, and I followed him. And the rest of it has been very eclectic in terms of literary influences.
Thank you. What are you currently working on?
Oh, heavens. As I said, we've been doing ElfQuest on and off for 33 years. Wendy just finished a major project that she'll talk about, and we're ramping up to begin our next ElfQuest cycle for this fall. It's called The Final Quest, and it's going to be the culmination of everything we've built for the last 3 decades.
The project I've been working on for the past 4 years is called Mask of the Red Death, and it's a reimagining of Edgar Allan Poe's classic short story. It's definitely for adults only, and it's very, very, very dark, and it was a direction I really wanted to go because basically I didn't want to be typecast in doing just one kind of thing.
Very smart. So number 5, you're almost done. Number 5 is, if you were stuck on a desert island with only one book, but knowing that you're going to be rescued, so you don't have to bring like a how-to book or anything, what graphic novel or prose would you bring with you?
Oh, good heavens, that's a
This is
tough
the librarian
one.
question.
Well, I'm going to fall back on an answer that I've given many times before. A book that I read years ago that had a great impact on me was by a fellow by the name of Philip Wiley, and it was called The Disappearance. And I've read it many, many times, but if I was on that desert island, knowing I was going to be rescued, I think I'd give it another shot.
If I was on a desert island, the very last thing I would want with me is a graphic novel of any kind whatsoever. And the more I think about, the more I run through in my mind of the various books that it could be, I would want a blank tablet.
Nice.
And I would want to write the book there.
Oh, perfect. All right, my last question for you is, of all of the comics that you've been reading in the past year, what would you recommend for kids?
Okay. Well, when you say kids, Can we get into the teens?
Absolutely.
I just read an amazing graphic novel by Darwin Cook. DC put it out. It is New Frontier, and it's the story of how the Justice League of America came to grow out of the old Justice Society of America. That sounds like a very juvenile concept, but he wove an engrossing and engaging story out of it, and I have the highest respect for what he did.
Wow, fantastic.
I'm stuck. I don't read comics. When you do it 24 hours a day, that's not what you do for entertainment.
Busman's Holiday, yeah.
What I can recommend to kids, though, is there are still, even though the manga and anime craze are over with, there are still some important manga that actually speak to Asian mythology. There's a number of titles, Rurouni Kenshin comes to mind, that I think even though the craze is over, the kids would still be interested in.
Fantastic. Thank you both so much. And again, ElfQuest was one of my gateways into comics, and thank you both so much for everything you've done. I appreciate it.